Hi everybody, it's Julessa. Today I'm going to show you how to take this full ring and turn it into a split shank ring so that you can put that on the back of a cabochon or back of a bezel, anything you can think of. I wanted to show you the full process of how I make a ring and get the ring shank ready for soldering, but I'm going to fast forward through the measuring, the cutting, and the bending of that so that we can address that in a future video. So the first thing you want to do is make sure your joint is as close as possible that you can get it, and it has some tension on it. And you can see here my joint is close but not quite there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my saw blade and run it through the joint and take off the excess that's keeping the joint from going together. You may have to run it through a couple of times, but in general you can get it done in maybe one or two swipes with your saw blade. Just go through it real easily. Make sure your fingers aren't in the way. When you get to the end, it might get a little tough because of the tension you've got on it. Just take your time. Let's see, mine got stuck here. There we go. Okay, my joint looks pretty good right now, but I'm going to go ahead and run it through one additional time to make sure that it's completely touching all the way through. Perfect. So now you can see my joint is touching. It's no longer spread like that. It's now touching like that. And that's it. So now I'm going to solder my joint and get it ready for rounding. I am using hard solder because I want the best joint possible. And since this is the only solder joint at this point, using hard solder is appropriate. So I need to flex the joint. There we go. I'm placing my ring on top of my solder. That's a second trick that I do. That way, when I see the ring fall down, I know my solder has made its way up into the joint. If I can get my torch to light. There, let's try. There we go. So now I'm going to run the heat first over the entire ring, get my flux to bubble. And then I'm going to focus on the joint, just going back and forth to try and pull that solder through the joint up to the top. I see it, the ring dropped just a little bit, and my solder is through the joint. So that's another tip. Place your ring on top of the solder on your soldering board. Add the heat and then watch the ring fall and make sure that the solder has gone through the joint completely. Okay, I rounded and filed my joint off camera just so that I can skip that step for you all. You all know how to do that. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to take this solid ring and turn it into a split shank like this. And one of the tricks that I use is I solder it first, round it, get it ready as though I were going to solder it onto the back plate of maybe a cabochon ring. But instead, what I do is I make a mark and cut the top of my ring off in order to make a split shank ring for the back of a ring. So the first thing you're going to need is something to mark your ring with for the cut. And then the second thing you're going to need is a ruler. Now, my joint is about right here. And the intent is to cut that joint off completely to make 2 new joints. So I'm going to take my ruler, place it across the joint, and I want to leave a little bit of a space between the bottom of the ring and the ruler so that I can get a good even cut. Take your Sharpie and mark 2 lines, one on each side of the shank. Then get your saw blade and cut on your 2 lines. If you go slow and take your time, you should get a fairly straight joint that needs very little cleanup. So I am going to go ahead and start. Watch your fingers. When the blade goes through, you don't want your fingers to be in the way, because 9 times out of 10 you're on the downstroke and it cuts right through your finger. And the bad part of that is you usually end up with a bunch of metal in the wound and it's hard to clean out. I'm getting close to the end, so I'm going to kind of speed up my sawing just a little bit and make my strokes a little bit shorter. And you don't want to put any forward pressure on the blade, otherwise you're going to get an uneven cut. Just be patient and take your time. There we go. So now I've got the one side cut. It may seem like your joint is off center because the pressure or the tension that you had on the ring actually pushed the joint apart, but that's okay, because once you cut through the other side, you should have an even line because of the marks that you made. So I put a little bit of burr lube on my blade, and I'm going to go ahead and cut through the other side. Now you have to kind of go carefully because it's hard to get your saw to get started in there. Oh, and this one's not wanting to cooperate. So let's try this again. There we go. Once it grabs, then you're good to go. Just take your time going through. And like I said, don't put any forward pressure on your blade. You can kind of change your angle a little bit to help cut it through, but if you're more comfortable just sticking with the straight up and down, you're perfectly welcome to do that. As I get towards the end of it, I'm going to speed up again and do shorter strokes. That way my piece of metal doesn't go flying across the room. I'm getting towards the end here. And you'll start to see it bend out just a little bit when you're getting at the end. There it goes. And done. The next thing you want to do to see if you cut straight is to place it right on your bench pin and look at it. And that is pretty darn good. I did pretty good on this one. It does need a little bit of cleanup, so I'm going to take my file and run through there. Both on the top and on the sides. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on my file because I don't want to mess up my ends and the cutting that I did do. I just want to flatten it out just a little bit. Check it periodically and make sure you're not going overboard, and that looks perfect right there. So now I've got 2 little angles right here. One is thinner than the other, one is wider than the other, and I want to take them down so that they're even for the sake of making it look not asymmetrical. We want it to have symmetry. So I'm going to take it on my pin and just straighten out the edge, flip it around, and do the same on the other side. And this time I'm going to make sure it's about the same width as the right hand side. Flip it back around, Do a little bit more work on it. And when it's done, it should stand up on your bench. Doesn't really wobble, and it looks straight. And that's tip number 3. So number 1, round your joint. Use pliers or ring bend or whatever you have. Get the joint as close as possible together with a little bit of tension behind it. Then run your saw blade through the joint until the joints meet up. So if they're sitting like this, you might have to use your ring bender just a little bit more, and you want to get it more like that. Maybe they might be apart, but you want it to get close together, and you might have a little space between the top and the bottom, or the right and the left. And what you're going to do with the saw blade is cut the excess out so that it makes it do that. And that will make your joint easier and more, or have less cleanup after the soldering is done. Then once your soldering is done, you round your ring and mark it with a ruler just below the solder joint, and then take your saw and cut it off. Check it to make sure it stands up. Clean it with your file if you need to. Check it again, and then you're done. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you for watching.